When I saw the way my daughter's teacher looked at me that morning, not like a stranger, but like someone who knew me, a chill went down my spine. It wasn't just a glance. It lingered. Heavy, uncertain, almost guilty. And though the air inside that school hallway smelled faintly of floor polish and fresh paper, something inside me turned sour. At first, I thought it was paranoia, that mother's instinct that sometimes confuses love with fear. But deep down, I knew this feeling. It was the same quiet twist in my stomach I had years ago, when my husband used to come home late and smell faintly of someone else's perfume. Back then, I buried it. For the sake of our family. For the sake of peace. But now, looking into the eyes of this young woman who taught my daughter's class, a woman maybe in her early 30s, calm, elegant, and far too composed for a first encounter, I felt that same ghost rise again. Her name was Miss Delaney, and that name would come to change everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my child, and the woman I once was. My name is Clara, and if you asked anyone around our neighborhood, they'd tell you I had the kind of life most women would envy. A stable marriage, a bright little girl named Sophie, and a tidy home at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac where lilac bushes bloomed every spring. I'd built my life like a well-folded bedsheet, neat, predictable, soft around the edges. My husband Daniel worked as a contractor, always on call, always busy. I used to love that about him, his focus, his drive. He'd leave at dawn, kiss my forehead gently and say, "Don't wait up, sweetheart." And I never did. Sophie was our light, 7 years old, curious and kind. She loved drawing rainbows and writing letters to her future self. Every afternoon, I'd wait by the window when the school bus dropped her off. She'd run up the path with her pink backpack bouncing, shouting, "Mommy, guess what Miss Delaney said today?" At first, I liked the sound of that name. Miss Delaney. She sounded warm, patient, like the kind of teacher every child deserves. Sophie adored her. She'd bring home little notes. "Sophie was wonderful in class today, so helpful." Or, "Your daughter has such imagination, Mrs. Carter. You must be proud." I was. God, I was. Our home, though modest, felt full. Mornings smelled like toast and coffee. Evenings were filled with the sound of Sophie's giggles, Daniel's deep voice telling stories, and the creak of our old rocking chair by the window. If you'd asked me then if I was happy, I would have said yes without hesitation. But happiness, I've learned, is sometimes just quiet ignorance dressed up as peace. It started on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Sophie came home quieter than usual, her eyes puffy, her little hands clutching her backpack like a secret. I asked, "Sweetheart, what's wrong? Did something happen at school?" She shook her head quickly. "No, Mommy. Miss Delaney just looked sad today." "Sad?" I repeated. "Why?" "I don't know," she whispered. She looked at me funny when she saw the picture of Daddy on my notebook. Then she asked if his name was Daniel. I remember freezing for just a second. Did she say anything else? Sophie frowned, thinking. She said, "Oh, I used to know someone by that name once." And then she didn't talk much the rest of the day. A small, uneasy laugh slipped out of me. "I'm sure it's just a coincidence, honey." But that night, when Daniel came home, drenched from the rain and smelling faintly of sawdust and cologne, I couldn't shake that thought. I mentioned it casually over dinner. Sophie's teacher said she used to know someone named Daniel. He looked up briefly, fork halfway to his mouth. "Oh yeah? It's a common name." "Yes," I said, studying him. "She teaches 2nd grade at Ridgewood Elementary. Do you know her?" He paused just long enough for my heart to notice. Then smiled, that same easy, disarming smile he always used when deflecting. "Nope. Never heard of her." And that was that. Except it wasn't. Because later that night, while folding laundry, I noticed Daniel's phone buzzing on the nightstand. A message flashed briefly on the screen before it dimmed. Just the letter. And something about that single initial, the way it mirrored Delaney, settled like a stone in my chest. I didn't confront him right away. I told myself it could have been anyone. But when you've been married long enough, you start noticing things that don't fit. The longer showers, the late-night texts, the distance in bed that no blanket can fix. Over the next few days, I began to watch. Not obsessively, but carefully. Daniel became guarded, His tone clipped whenever I mentioned school. Sophie still spoke of Miss Delaney, but now she'd lower her voice, as if protecting her teacher from something she couldn't name. Then one morning, I decided I needed to see this woman for myself. Not at parent-teacher night, not in passing, but up close unannounced. I dressed neatly, combed my hair, and drove to Ridgewood Elementary just after lunch. The school smelled like crayons and floor wax, a mixture of innocence and order. When I entered room 2B, Miss Delaney was kneeling beside a small boy's desk, helping him with a worksheet. Her hair, soft chestnut brown, was pinned up loosely, and she had this calm, unhurried grace about her. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm Sophie Carter's mother." She turned, and for a heartbeat, I forgot how to breathe. Because in that split second, before she spoke, her eyes widened with unmistakable recognition. Not the polite kind, the personal kind. "Oh," she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "You're Mrs. Carter." "Yes," I said slowly. "And you're Miss Delaney." Her lips parted, but no words came. Just a faint flush of color rising to her cheeks, and the sound of a distant clock ticking somewhere in the classroom. Something unspoken passed between us in that silence, a strange. But I knew then and there that whatever connected this woman to electric awareness that neither of us could name my husband wasn't just coincidence. It was history, and I intended to find out exactly what kind. I remember leaving that classroom with a storm brewing quietly in my chest. Miss Delaney had tried to smile as I thanked her, but her composure cracked, just slightly, when our eyes met again at the door. That night, I couldn't stop replaying that moment. Her startled face, the tremor in her voice, the strange way she said, "You're Mrs. Carter," as though the name itself carried a secret she wished I wouldn't uncover. Daniel came home late again, past 10. His boots left muddy streaks by the door, and he moved around me with the careful silence of someone trying not to be noticed. "Long day?" I asked, folding my arms. "Yeah," he sighed, avoiding my gaze. "New project in Glendale. Delays everywhere. You know how it goes." I studied him, the tired lines around his mouth, the faint smudge on his collar that didn't look like dust. He kissed the top of my head, a mechanical gesture, and went upstairs to shower. The scent of his cologne trailed behind him. That expensive one I didn't buy. I sat there, in the dim kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint patter of rain outside. My reflection in the window looked like someone else, a woman suspended between truth and denial. That night, I dreamed of Miss Delaney, her eyes sad, conflicted, her voice whispering my husband's name. And when I woke up I knew. I couldn't keep pretending this was nothing. The next day, I volunteered for the school's reading event. Sophie was thrilled. "Mommy, you'll get to see Miss Delaney again." I smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. I will." Inside the classroom, the children sat in small circles, crayons scattered across tables. Miss Delaney stood by the window, sunlight glinting off her wedding finger, bare. No ring. When she saw me, something flickered across her face, discomfort? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to name. "Mrs. Carter," she greeted softly. "Thank you for helping today." "My pleasure," I replied, steadying my tone. "You're wonderful with the kids. Sophie really admires you." Her lips curved into a faint, almost sad smile. "She's a lovely girl. You've raised her well." The way she said it, "You've raised her well," carried a weight I couldn't quite place, as if she wanted to add better than I was raised. During break, while the children ran outside, I stayed behind, pretending to tidy books. Miss Delaney gathered papers at her desk, her hands trembling ever so slightly. I spoke softly, deliberately. "You said something interesting to Sophie the other day." Her head lifted instantly. "Oh, she mentioned you asked if her father's name was Daniel. You said you used to know someone by that name." For a heartbeat, her expression froze. Then she forced a polite smile. "Oh, that? It must have just slipped out. I knew a Daniel in college, that's all." "Really?" I tilted my head. "Where did you go to college?" "State University," she answered too quickly. I nodded. "That's funny. My husband studied there too for 2 years, before he transferred." Her throat bobbed. "Small world," she whispered. Our eyes locked. The silence between us thickened. Not empty, but full of everything neither of us dared to say. Then the bell rang, shattering the tension. She turned away, her shoulders tight, her breath shallow. That was all the confirmation I needed. I didn't confront Daniel immediately. I wanted to know before I accused. So the next evening, after Sophie went to bed, I pulled out our old photo albums. Daniel rarely looked through them anymore, but I did, especially on nights when I needed to remember why I stayed. And there, tucked between wedding photos and vacation shots, I found one from his early years, his college days. A group picture, faded at the edges. Daniel stood with his arm around a woman. Young, bright-eyed, with chestnut brown hair and a familiar dimple near her lip. My breath caught. It was her. Miss Delaney. She looked barely 20 in the photo, smiling up at him like the world had narrowed to the space between them. Scrawled beneath the picture in messy ink, Dan and Lily, 2008. The next morning, I waited until Sophie's bus pulled away before I said, "We need to talk." Daniel was sipping his coffee, half distracted by his phone. About what? Your daughter's teacher. He froze. I saw the exact second his heartbeat faltered. The smallest twitch near his jaw. The way his hand stopped midair. What about her? He asked quietly. You tell me, I said, sliding the photo across the table. His eyes flicked down. For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. The kind that fills a house when the truth finally enters it. He closed his eyes, exhaled sharply, then whispered, Clara, it was years ago. Years ago. My voice cracked. You had an affair with her, didn't you? He didn't deny it. Not with words. Just that broken silence that said everything. I didn't know she'd end up teaching Sophie, he said finally, his voice low, ashamed. It's complicated. Complicated. I repeated. You think this is complicated? You cheated on me, and now she's in our daughter's life. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Clara, please. I ended it long before we had Sophie. It meant nothing. I laughed bitterly. Nothing? Then why does she still look at you like you're the unfinished chapter she can't close? He dropped his head, guilt etched into every line of his face. I didn't know she was here. I swear it. I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But when you've been lied to once, even truth starts to sound rehearsed. That night, we slept in separate rooms. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the heater blending with my thoughts. Miss Delaney had said nothing yet. But how long before Sophie sensed the tension? Before the quiet in our home began to crack open like an old wound? By morning, I'd made up my mind. If Daniel couldn't face her, I would. I went to Ridgewood again that afternoon. Miss Delaney was grading papers alone. She looked up when I entered, startled, but not surprised. Mrs. Carter, she said softly. I wasn't expecting. I know who you are, I interrupted gently. Her lips parted, and tears welled up almost instantly. I thought you might. She gestured to a chair. I sat, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. She looked down, voice trembling. Because I didn't want to hurt you. Or Sophie. Or him. So you thought pretending would protect us? She shook her head. Tears slipping down her cheeks. I thought I could just teach. Move on. But when I saw Sophie, she looks like him, you know. It brought everything back. Everything. I repeated quietly. What exactly was everything, Miss Delaney? She took a shaky breath. I was young. He told me he was separated. I believed him. My stomach twisted. Separated. She nodded slowly. When I found out he was married, I left. I never contacted him again. My mind spun. He told her he was separated. That meant she wasn't just a mistake. She was a deception layered on another lie. I whispered, almost to myself. He lied to both of us. She nodded. Yes. And I've lived with that guilt ever since. When I drove home from the school that evening, the world outside felt strangely quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a storm but carries no peace. The trees blurred past my window as my mind replayed every word Miss Delaney had said. He told me he was separated. That sentence echoed like a bell in an empty church. All those years I'd spent defending Daniel's long work hours, his late-night calls, his absences. I'd been protecting the very lie that had betrayed me. When I got home, Sophie was sitting on the floor, coloring. She looked up and smiled, completely unaware that the fragile world around her had begun to crack. "Mommy, Miss Delaney said we're starting a new storybook next week. I can't wait." I knelt down, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Sweetheart, do you like Miss Delaney?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "She's kind. She always listens." Her answer pierced me in a way I didn't expect, because it was true. Despite everything, Miss Delaney wasn't cruel. She was broken, maybe, but not malicious. And my daughter loved her. I forced a smile. "That's good, honey. It's nice to have teachers who care." But inside, a new fear settled in. How do you tell a child that her teacher was once the woman her father betrayed you with? How do you destroy a part of her innocence without letting bitterness spill over it? I decided then, I wouldn't let this secret touch Sophie. Not yet. That night, Daniel came home early, his face pale, eyes shadowed. He must have known I'd spoken to her. "Clara," he said quietly, standing in the doorway of our bedroom, "I'm sorry." I didn't look at him. "You should be." I was young. Stupid. I thought things between us were falling apart. "You remember those days you were distant and I turned sharply. "Don't you dare make this my fault." His voice faltered. "I'm not. I'm just trying to explain." "Explain what?" I asked bitterly. "That you lied to her? That you lied to me? Or that you brought that lie into our daughter's classroom?" He rubbed his temples, defeated. "I didn't know she was here. I swear, Clara. I didn't." "I believe you," I said finally, surprising myself with the calm in my tone. "But that doesn't make it better." He sank onto the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped. "What do you want me to do?" For a long moment, I just stared at him. The man I once thought I knew. The man who built our home with his hands, and then quietly burned its foundation with his choices. "I want you to tell me the truth," I said softly. "All of it. Every detail, so I can finally stop imagining worse than what really happened." And he did. For hours he talked about the loneliness he'd felt after our miscarried pregnancy, the distance that grew between us, the comfort he found in someone who listened. He said her name, Lily, with regret, not affection. But hearing it still hurt like a wound reopening. By the end, I wasn't angry anymore. Just exhausted. I looked at him and said, "You don't get to fix this overnight. Not with flowers or apologies. You broke something that might never mend." He nodded. "I know." Then for the first time in years he cried. Quietly, shamefully, that I thought I could contain the secret. Keep it locked inside our house where no one could see. But secrets, I've learned, have a way of finding light. 2 weeks later, a parent from Sophie's class called me. Her tone was hushed, curious. "Clara, have you heard about Miss Delaney?" My heart thudded. "No." "What about her?" She resigned. Suddenly. "No explanation." I froze. "When?" "This morning. The principal said it was a personal matter." After we hung up, I sat in silence. Miss Delaney had done what Daniel never could. She'd removed herself. That afternoon, I went to the school to collect Sophie. The principal, a kind older man, stopped me in the hallway. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, "I know this is sudden. Miss Delaney asked me to give you this." He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Mrs. Carter, I've accepted a position in another district. I thought leaving quietly was best for everyone, especially Sophie. I hope one day you'll understand that my intention was never to harm, only to move on from something that should have stayed buried. I wish your family peace. Lily Delaney." I folded the note carefully, my throat tightening. Outside, Sophie ran into my arms. "Mommy, Miss Delaney's leaving. She said she'll miss me." I hugged her tightly, whispering, "Sometimes people leave because they have to, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean they don't care." And as I held her, I realized, for the first time, I wasn't angry anymore. Just sad. Sad for all of us. For the choices that chained our lives together in ways none of us intended. That night, Daniel came home early again. He'd heard about Lily's resignation from another parent. He stood by the window, staring out into the dark. "She left, didn't she?" "Yes," I said simply. He nodded. I guess that's for the best. I wanted to say something cruel, something final, but instead, I just said, she took responsibility. Have you? He turned toward me, his eyes weary. I'm trying. I believed him. In his own flawed way, he was trying. Over the next few weeks, he started showing up, really showing up. Dinner with Sophie, small conversations with me that didn't end in silence. He even asked about therapy. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. One evening, as we sat outside watching Sophie chase fireflies, he said quietly, "Do you ever think we can start over?" I looked at him, this man who had broken me, and somehow still felt like home. I don't know, I said honestly, but I think we can start honestly. He nodded, eyes glistening. That's enough for me. Months passed. Lily's note stayed tucked inside my drawer, a reminder of the truth, but also of grace. Sophie still talked about her sometimes. I hope Miss Delaney's new students like her. They will, I always said. She's a good teacher. Because that part was true. Whatever mistakes she made, she wasn't the villain I'd imagined. Just another woman who believed the wrong man's story. In time, Daniel and I found our rhythm again. Different, fragile, but real. We didn't erase the past. We learned to live beside it. And every so often, when Sophie would smile or draw a picture of our family, I'd think of how close we came to losing everything. And how sometimes survival isn't about staying untouched, but learning how to keep loving through the scars. There's something strange about forgiveness. It doesn't come with trumpets or tears. It just creeps in one morning, quiet and small, when your heart gets tired of carrying the weight. For months, I carried mine like a stone. I'd wake up each day pretending everything was fine, packing Sophie's lunch, brewing Daniel's coffee, smiling through the stillness that sat between us. But inside, I was still that woman in the classroom, looking into the eyes of a past I never asked for. Then one evening, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked something I wasn't ready for. "Mommy, why do people make mistakes?" Her question hung in the dim light like a confession. I sat on the edge of her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Because people forget to think with their hearts, sweetheart. They make choices that hurt others, and sometimes themselves too. She frowned, small brows furrowed. But if they say sorry, does it make it better? I smiled sadly. Not always right away. But it's a start. She nodded, satisfied, then whispered, "I hope Miss Delaney isn't sad anymore." I froze, staring at her gentle, innocent face, the kind of forgiveness that comes so naturally to a child. And I realized, maybe Sophie was the lesson. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to send, just to release. "Dear Lily, I don't hate you. I did for a while. But hate only burns the hand that holds it. I see now that we were both misled, both wounded by the same lie. You just carried your part in silence, while I lived mine out loud. You did what you thought was right in leaving, and for that, I thank you. Sophie remembers you with warmth, not confusion, and that's a gift I'll always appreciate. I wish you peace. Truly, Clara." When I folded the letter and placed it inside my drawer beside her old note, I felt something lift from me. A breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. Spring came early that year. The lilac bushes in front of our house bloomed before March ended, their scent spilling through the open windows. Daniel started tending to them again, pruning, watering, as if caring for something living might atone for what he'd broken. We began going for evening walks together after Sophie went to bed. At first, we didn't talk much, just quiet footsteps and shared air. Then slowly, words came back. Not about the past, but about small things. The neighbor's new dog, Sophie's art projects, the way the moonlight made everything look softer. One night, under the soft hum of crickets, Daniel said, "You didn't have to stay." I looked at him, his face older now, worn but honest. "I know. So why did you?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. Because walking away is easy when you stop caring. But I still cared. He nodded, eyes glistening. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that." And though I didn't say it aloud, I knew he already understood. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just stops it from owning you. In our small town, news traveled quietly but deeply. Some people knew pieces of what had happened. Whispers floated, assumptions formed, but no one ever said anything directly to me. One afternoon at the market, I ran into Mrs. Green, another parent from Sophie's class. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "It's a shame about Miss Delaney. She was a good teacher." "She was," I replied simply. Mrs. Green nodded, her tone softening. "You know, I always thought it was kind of brave, the way she left without drama. Some folks don't know how to bow out gracefully." I smiled faintly. Sometimes leaving is the most graceful thing you can do. As I walked away, I realized that this quiet dignity, was what Aunt May used to call the second kind of strength. The kind that doesn't roar. The kind that survives. A few months later, while helping Sophie clean her room, I found a crayon drawing tucked under her bed. It was of 3 figures, me, Daniel, and Sophie all holding hands. And next to us, drawn slightly apart but still smiling, was another woman with brown hair. In shaky, colorful letters, Sophie had written. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Sophie noticed. "Do you like it, Mommy?" I nodded, my voice thick. "I love it, sweetheart." She grinned proudly. "Miss Delaney said love is when you forgive even when you're sad." That's when I realized Lily had already done her part. She hadn't left Sophie with confusion or bitterness. She'd left her with a lesson. And maybe that was her own way of asking for forgiveness, too. Time softened the edges of everything, even betrayal. Daniel and I never went back to who we were before, but we built something more honest, less perfect, more human. We talked openly about our past. We even started attending couples therapy, not because I wanted to fix him, but because I wanted to understand myself again. The parts of me that had been silenced by loyalty. And through it all, Sophie grew bright, kind, empathetic. She never knew the full story. Maybe one day, when she's older, she'll learn that adults can love deeply and still fail one another. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I hear Daniel breathing softly beside me, I think about Lily, wherever she is. I hope she found the peace she was searching for. Because in some strange way, her leaving gave me mine. Looking back, I've learned that betrayal doesn't always end a story. Sometimes, it begins a new one. The kind where love isn't blind anymore. The kind where truth, though painful, finally lets you breathe. I used to believe that being a good wife meant forgiving silently. But now I know, real forgiveness isn't silence. It's choosing to live free from resentment, even when you have every reason to hold on to it. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. That people will disappoint you, but what defines you isn't how they fail, it's how you rise afterward. Because forgiveness isn't for the ones who hurt you. It's for the part of yourself that still deserves peace. Would you have forgiven them? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe that even broken hearts can heal, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Sometimes life breaks us in the places we trusted most. But child, don't you ever think that broken means finished. Because it's in those cracks, those quiet, aching spaces, where the light starts to pour in. Clara learned that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. Not for the one who hurt her, but for the woman she was becoming. And Daniel, well, some men spend years learning that love without truth is just a kind lie. As for Lily, perhaps her story was never about stealing a husband, but about returning a mirror, so Clara could finally see herself clearly. So if you've ever been betrayed, if your heart still trembles at the memory of what they did, I want you to remember this. You can't rewrite the past, but you can stop it from writing you. Forgive. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace.